The old boat is about to blow apart. The wind and the waves are bashing against the boat so much that at any moment the boat might be pushed into the rocks, or a wave might topple over it and the boat will disintegrate. The disciples on board will drown. They're caught in the middle of a terrible storm. There's weeping and wailing. A young girl just died because help took a little too long in getting there. There's singing and dancing and glasses clinking and beverages overflowing. There's party music being played everywhere. And you know what happens at parties? A terrible decision is made. And it seems like there's no one there to step in for a rescue. There's a commotion and a complaint as crowds up to 5,000 are pushing their way forward looking for something to eat, and there's not a crumb of food in sight. And once again, there are waves and wind and thunder and lightning as the disciples are caught at sea in the middle of a life-threatening storm for the second time. There's so much noise in St. Mark chapters 4 through 6 that it's a wonder that we heard anything that Jesus said at all. It's a wonder that any of his words were written down so that we could read them later. But they are. And in the middle of that first storm, at the end of Mark chapter 4, the central question by the disciples is asked, "Lord, don't you care that we are perishing?" Are you going to act, Jesus? Are you going to do something for us? Or are we going to have to bail ourselves out and find our own solution when we obviously can't? We've tried it already. But when Jesus hears the complaint of his people, he acts. He takes action. He gets up. He goes with Jairus. He calls his disciples away for a time of grief. He heals a woman who's bled for 12 years. When Jesus is around his people suffering, he does indeed take action. But what we find in Mark chapters 4 through 6 is that Jesus' word is the action. When he speaks, the action happens. And so he gets up to rebuke the wind and the waves are still. And the woman who bled for 12 years, her healing isn't complete when the bleeding stops. No, her healing is complete when Jesus says to her, "Go in peace. Your faith has made you well." And even though there's a crowd of people laughing outside the door, the dead girl is raised when Jesus says, "Arise." And in Jesus' words, the disciples find both mission and rest. So then, it's really about trust. We as disciples are so often concerned with what Jesus is telling us to do and what actions we might take, or we also like to talk about the actions we have taken as we follow Jesus. But really, being a disciple is falling before our Lord and begging him to take action. And can we trust him to do that? Well, if you want to know the answer to that question, come and find out. On June 21st, we'll begin a sermon series on Mark chapters 4 through 6, where we'll beg Jesus to take action for us and find healing, peace, and comfort in his words. But until then, if you should find yourself in trouble, look to the one place where all the action is, the words of Christ.